views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Nice to see you. It's time for the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's television program where we talk to journalists, we talk to writers, we talk to filmmakers, we talk to editors, we talk to anybody who's putting stuff out in the Bronx and give you an idea of like what's in their minds, what they're thinking about. So when you read something or you absorb something, you get the idea of what is really behind it. We have two great guests this evening, and we're going to start off with my buddy Jeff Colton, who is, I guess, down there in Manhattan with City and State magazine. Hi, Jeff. Nice to have you with us again.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be back on BronxNet.
We really appreciate it. And just for people who don't know, I mean, everybody in the know, everybody who deals with politics or news or all these things, subscribes to City and State New York. Explain to me what it is and explain to the audience what it is. So if they're not subscribed, you can get it online, you can get the magazine. Explain what it is, and then we'll get into some of the real important Bronx issues.
Yeah, sure thing. We're a weekly magazine and website. We cover politics at the city and the state level, hence the name, City and State. And honestly, we market ourselves towards insiders, for the people that work in politics, follow politics closely, want to know more about your elections. We're really for the diehards, and I love working here for that reason. But we're a free weekly magazine, free on the internet. We have no paywall like a lot of other places. So check us out, cityandstateny.com.
That's it, City and State NY. And what you're saying is totally true. And I'm going to tell you this: like when my birthday happened, I got more comments from people who saw it on City and State New York than I on my own Facebook page, which is like ridiculous. But yeah, everybody who wants to know, and it's not only for people in the know, people who want to know should check out City and State New York. All right, let's get right to it because you guys don't mince words, and I'm not going to either. What happened with Councilmember Andy King, frankly, was extraordinary, where he's been suspended from the city council. Some people even said, and I'm saying he should either resign or maybe they should have expelled him, all of which is rather historic. Just talk to me about how egregious his offenses are or were, and what your impression is of what the city council decided to do with him.
Yeah, sure thing. So there's a long list of substantiated complaints against Andy King. It all starts with a couple years ago, he was found guilty of sexual harassment, one of his staffers. She was subsequently fired and then filed a complaint that Andy King retaliated against her. The city council started digging, looking into it, and they claimed that King, the council member from the Northeast Bronx, represents Co-op City, Williamsbridge, that whole area. They say that King then retaliated not just against that staffer, but retaliated against all of his staffers, and really made life very difficult for anybody that was cooperating with the investigation into his office. He would kick people out of the office, put them on leave. He held a all-staff meeting inside his house, away from the office, various stuff like that. And then as the investigators were looking into his conduct, they also found some potential irregularities financially. They're accusing him of using government resources for personal gain, using his staff to plan a retreat and even plan his stepdaughter's wedding in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So it's a complex case. There's lots of stuff, lots of accusations against King. But the overall picture is of a council member who does not treat his staff well and possibly abuses privileges of the office.
The one thing that you didn't mention, not that the list wasn't long enough already, is the fact that his wife has been on the payroll That is, I mean, aside from everything else you said, that in and of itself is egregious. How far would a council member have to go to really be expelled? Because that was discussed, and I think Jamie Van Bramers had said, you know what, maybe he ought to go, but that didn't fly.
That's right. So this report came out of the City Council Committee on Standards and Ethics, kind of the internal committee
Right.
that deals with ethics violations within the council. They suggested, a 5-member committee suggested that King should be suspended from the council for 30 days, made to pay a $15,000 fine, made to undergo some training, that he would actually be booted from every single committee he's a member of, including the Committee on Juvenile Justice, where he is the chairman, and and have an internal monitor on his office. So the city council staff would appoint a monitor to sit in his office and basically keep an eye on him and make sure that he doesn't break any rules. So a really serious punishment here, and it's further than the city council has ever gone against a sitting member. I mean, no member in recent history, to anybody's memory, has ever been suspended.
Yes,
so this is serious.
It's pretty significant. I want to, I'm always thinking about Bronxites, and so now Councilmember King, and I know him well, and he's been on our programs any number of times. He's generally a very responsive elected official. Now, some people may agree or disagree with some of the things that he has done or said, but the fact is, he, from the service point of view, I think many people would say, hey, he's been great. He runs events. He's passionate about his issues. So it's a hit on the community. That's always my focus, is thinking about Bronx people. But
right, we should note also that King denied everything. Didn't even really try and defend himself. He just complained about the process. But he denied everything. He said that he was being targeted. He said he didn't have a chance to defend himself. And he gathered a good number of members of his community, church people, just supporters, to his office in the Bronx last weekend to show their support of him during this process, during this inquiry.
It wouldn't. Let me just interject, because I want to get to one other topic before we run out of time. It wouldn't surprise me that happened, because I know there are many people who follow him. What is very ironic is he used the word lynching and was criticized for it, and President Trump used the word lynching. And if you trace some of the things that you had said, allegations of harassment, influencing or harassing people who retaliated or reported on you, even though they are obviously politically diametrically in different places, there is a similarity between the way that each seems to be commanding their office.
Yeah, no, I did find it interesting that there's this massive impeachment inquiry happening down in Washington, D.C., and then, of course, totally different circumstances, but also the city council is going through an investigation of one of their own at the same time, and it moved much quicker.
Yes.
This investigation was open in March. He's now suspended from the city council.
That's a whole different thing. I was just noticing the use of the word lynching, and I think I saw an article somewhere, I don't know if it was in your publication, where they said, well, wait a minute, I think it was the Daily News, where they talked about, the fact that, can we stop using that word? Anyway, I want to talk about this jail proposal to close Rikers, which will mean that there is a jail ultimately located in Mott Haven, which many people in the Bronx didn't want to see. What's your thought in general, and then specifically about the Bronx angle in it, which that many people did not want that jail in Mott Haven?
Right. The Bronx plays a really interesting role in this whole process. So a couple weeks ago, the city council approved the building of 4 new jails. And the plan is to move the inmates into these 4 new jails, one in the Bronx, Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn, and to then close Rikers Island by 2026. So the process is going to take a while, but this was one big step in that process. The Bronx is interesting because the city wants to build a jail where there was not a jail before. They want to build a jail on the NYPD tow pound down in Mott Haven. All the other jails are going to be built on top of existing jails. There's one in downtown Brooklyn, downtown Manhattan, Kew Gardens, Queens. So the Bronx one was naturally going to face some more opposition. It's much harder to build a jail where there isn't one than where there already was one. And that came out most obviously in the votes of City Councilman Rafael Salamanca, who represents much of the South Bronx, including Soundview, that sort of area. Mm-hmm. And Salamanca, he actually voted in support of all three other jails, but not the one in the Bronx.
Well, as you well know, Jeff, what the council often does when they come to these kinds of things, if it was, let's say, decided individually about the Mott Haven jail, they cede to the council member whose district it is, and they say, well, if you like it, and the council member who is in that district is Diana Ayala, and she has supported the plan. Borough president didn't like it. Many other people didn't like it. And I had heard, frankly, and I can't even tell you how many interviews about it, is that the movement to put that jail where the borough president wanted, near the courthouses, which does make sense, was also a complicated area because of, who really owns that property. Is it state property? Is it city property? So, I mean, I don't know. I just know there's a lot of unhappy people in the Bronx about it.
Definitely a lot of unhappy people. And yeah, the city basically claimed it would be far too difficult and not enough space to build a jail next to the courthouse where it would make sense. But, I mean, the other interesting angle about this is there is currently a jail in the Bronx. It's the Barge, the
That's
Vernon
right.
C. Bain Correctional Center.
Jeff, we're going to have to go, and certainly that Vernon C. Bain Center is something Councilmember Salamanca has said, that's got to be first. Jeff, never enough time, always too many issues, but you and all my friends and colleagues over there at City and State New York are doing a great job. We'll see you next time. Let's hope good news the next time instead of all these complicated things.
Hey, thanks so much, Gary. Thanks for
All
having
the
me on.
best. Say hello. All right, we're going to take a short break. We have a Bronx filmmaker coming up who is doing and has done some unbelievable work. We're going to show you a trailer of an unbelievably important film. So don't go away.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go along, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa! Master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, it's Ava, and this is Tess from Vivo's Do It Yourselfie, where we recreate the hottest looks from today's biggest music videos.
After cleaning out our closet, we have a lot of clothes we don't wear anymore.
Like this old t-shirt.
It's not garbage, it's actually a brand new rug.
And to make it, all you need to do is cut, tie, and glue.
Cut the t-shirt into strips.
Tie the strips into knots.
And glue the knots to the bath mat. I love it. Give your garbage another life.
And recycle.
All right, back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and we're switching gears a little bit here, and we're going to say hello to Bahati Adrian Best, who is a producer, filmmaker, by trade cameraman, but we'll find out all about it. Nice to have you with us, sir.
Thank you.
Let's just talk about your background. You worked at ABC,
For years.
and I'm looking at this bio here, Peabody Award, Emmy Awards. I mean, the list goes on. It covered, the U.S. Open, Olympics at Lake Placid. Okay, that's it. Good night. But out of you looking back at your career, your 40-year career at WABC, one moment that stands out, a few things that stand out, or even something in general that you take with you into your retired life, into your next life?
There are quite a few things. Of course, the Olympics was a big deal. Being up at Lake Placid, working in weather that was 30 degrees below zero. I'll never forget that. But
and I can just tell you, because I've been around a little while, no producer backed off. They said, get the shot.
That's right.
Be where you got to be. You got to stand there while we're waiting.
Yep.
You stand there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I get it.
In the middle of a snowstorm.
That's right.
Yeah. But that and working with the Monday Night Football guys, knowing how it goes sell back in the day, being connected with Muhammad Ali, who, much to my surprise, recognized me every time he came to the studio. Yeah, the champ would he would look at you and give you the face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you sat down, you said, this is unusual for me, because you're usually where some of our young interns and professionals are, behind the camera. So it's interesting having you in front of the camera. Let's talk about the film that you made. You grew up in the Patterson houses.
Yes.
And tell me about what compelled you to make a film. The film is called?
The Patterson.
The Patterson. And what compelled you to say, now during your retired life, you're going to make a movie or a film?
Well, there were several things. When I first got out of the service and took film courses, friends of mine heard about it from the neighborhood. And so I was approached back then by a couple of people, Nathan Dukes, who was a good friend of mine, we went to school together, and said...
Can we say what high school you went to?
Oh, Samuel Gompers Vocational.
I was thinking maybe
technical,
Taft, but Gompers is...
vocational and technical high school, and all boys back then.
Wow. I went to Clinton when it was all boys, so bad idea, didn't like it. Go ahead, I'm sorry. That was an editorial comment from me. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, Nate Archibald is also in the piece.
I'm well aware, and we can talk old Bronx schools. They just named the gymnasium after
Yes, they did. I was there.
Oh, I was there too. Yeah. We didn't say hello. Anyway, go ahead, keep going. I'm sorry.
But anyway, the main thing that started me on this quest was, while working with ABC Sports and News, people would ask me where I was from. And I would tell them from the Bronx. And they would say, from the South Bronx?
Uh-oh.
And I said, yeah. Well, how come you don't have an accent?
Oh, yeah. And how come you're a nice guy?
Yeah. And the other question was, wasn't it dangerous? And I would say, no, not really. What would make you think that?
So I want to rewind the clock a little bit. When people talk about NYCHA housing and public housing and Patterson houses right now, you immediately look at what is going on in public housing right now. What was going on in public housing when you grew up was totally different.
It was camaraderie. It was friendship. It was people who were going to school to learn. I never knew the word nerd when I grew up. I was not familiar with that word, because everybody was studious. Everybody wanted to learn academics. We were graded on civics. We wanted to learn music. We wanted to play ball. We had an after-school center that was open to us after school hours. We were able to go to the after-school centers.
Listen, I've got to editorialize. The idea that midnight basketball doesn't work is a bad idea.
It's a very
bad idea. And I grew up in a different part of the Bronx, but my parents played in night centers, so they got to play volleyball and basketball with their neighbors and friends. How do you build communities? That's how. Sorry,
exactly.
I had to say it because that's what I would advocate for right now.
And what's interesting is that people I talked to who didn't even know anything about the projects or New York or the Bronx or anything. Many people had the same experience coming from New Jersey, for example, or Chicago. You know, I talked to friends of mine from Chicago. They said, yeah, you know.
Although things have changed. Now,
They had to, yes.
we're going to show a trailer of the Patterson, and in there, and we'll talk about it after we take a look at it, in there are the clear definition of what changed and why things changed. So any introduction necessary? We've already done it.
Roll it.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the Patterson by Bahati Adrian Best. Let's see it.
Every time you hear about this project, there's always some kind of violence.
Less than a week after 16-year-old Ocean Conway was shot in the head at the Patterson houses, community members rallied together to voice that they've had just about enough.
It is not normal for somebody gets shot in broad daylight. We have to stand up. This is where we work at. This is where we live at. We have to wake up.
There's a system that's waiting for our kids. It's called mass incarceration.
It wasn't always like that. When I grew up there, it was a place of harmony.
I think that the people genuinely love each other.
Unfortunately, these kids don't have that unity like we had. We stuck together like glue.
South Bronx at that time was, to me, a heaven haven. When we were growing up, all the community centers were open. And we spent a lot of time in those type of environments to keep us safe.
We had a place to go. Summer, winter, fall.
People were really competitive academically. I hung with a group of people. They were very, very smart people.
We were just so fortunate and blessed when we came out of the Patterson in the 50s to have all those things.
And I think a lot of us who were searching for identity, okay, basketball was a way of escaping that type of negative environment that was outside.
We were headed for greatness. They were headed for greatness. They were destroyed.
The worst thing that ever happened, the doors locked. The project stopped being the project.
The drugs first came into the community by 1967, and it just destroyed a bunch of people. The federal government, the city, and the state government, all three, I hold responsible for letting the project deteriorate.
My hope for Patterson houses is that we create a community of opportunities.
It is up to us to put down the fear, and that when we see our brother and our sister on a path that's crazy for them, to pull them back in and say, no, bro, don't do that. No, sis, don't do that.
Nobody talks about the fact that public housing was a place where people of all backgrounds shared their food and music, where people of all backgrounds lived and learned together. There are 341 projects in New York City proper. The people who lived in those projects have similar stories to tell, 7 decades worth. They tell what it was like in one of those projects, the Patterson.
All right, there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Bahati Adrian Best, that's a trailer. What are the plans for the film? How long is it in when you see the whole thing?
The running time is an hour and a half.
Okay.
What I plan to do is put into festivals, take it around the country. But I want the people, particularly the people who are in it, I want them to see it first. So there will be a screening.
Some locals, we want local showings. You were just telling me, just to drop names, I mean, Tiny Archibald is in the trailer and obviously in the piece. You knew him growing up. He lived right near you.
He was, he lived on the 3rd floor. My family lived on the 2nd floor. My mother raised 4 boys by herself, so when she went to work, she would leave the key with Mrs. Archibald, Miss Julie. And so when I came home from school, since I was the oldest, I had to let my brothers in.
You get a sense of it from the trailer that we saw. Archival footage, there's a lot of new footage. Talk to me about interweaving that, and in other words, what's the progression the documentary takes so that we can understand, I guess, where we were and where we're at?
Well, first I had to find people to talk about growing up there. And I shot all of those interviews first. During the editing process, they would bring things up, and I would have to match what they were talking about with archival footage. So there's a lot of stills that I had to get from people, a lot of my own stuff that I put in there.
And I guess any of the old, if there were videos, we would say, but they were films. That of course has to be converted. Were there films?
They were all digitized.
Everybody's got family moves and all that.
Right.
What I started to say before we looked at it is what the change was, and I believe they mentioned it in there, that really the drug thing really was the beginning of a systemic change of what happened at Patterson.
When I graduated high school,
which give me a year,
in '65,
from Gompers,
from San Gompers, I started to see a change in people. Some of the people that I knew
in that neighborhood.
Yeah, people that I knew who were very smart, who looked like they were going on their way to bigger things, would be strung out on the park benches in the neighborhood.
Wow.
And people who I used to recognize, I physically could not recognize them anymore because they were strung out. Now, the rumor was that there was somebody who came into the neighborhood, who drove into the neighborhood, opened up his trunk, and for free gave out drugs. The next time the kids went back to get more drugs, he said, "You got to pay me."
So he hooked them first and then made the sale.
Yes.
Well, that's just great. I mean, and that really was the beginning. And then, of course, I mean, you could look today, the disinvestment in it and letting the buildings be not habitable, really, for respectable people. That of course, is all entwined in this. We were just talking, and we're going to wrap it up with this. I find, and I mentioned it to you, everywhere I go in the Bronx now, people are said, "That's it. We're not doing that anymore. We're going to live a different kind of life. We're going to fight for environmental justice. We're going to get better food for our kids. We're going to open up those gymnasiums so we can do what we need to do." I guess that's the story here.
People are tired of it, and in the Patterson in particular, there are two women who are prominent fighters in the neighborhood.
And they're going to be in the film?
They're in there as well.
Listen, Bahati Adrian Best, what a great job, what a great concept. When are we going to see it, or when can we see it?
Well,
Soon
we're in the finishing stages of it, hopefully before the year is up.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be another one of those must-sees in the Bronx. You want to learn about the Bronx, you want to learn about Bronx culture, you got to learn about it from a Bronx guy.
Thank you very much.
One of the greats, man, a great cameraman, and now, I don't want to say the culmination of your life's work, but this is a pretty important project.
Very much so.
Very much so. Right in his blood there. All right, so that's it. That's all for the Bronx Buzz tonight. We will see you next week. We'll have Bronx Talk Monday night, and you can check out all the other BronxNet shows. We thank our crew of thousands, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.